The following program contains documentary footage depicting graphic violence which some viewers may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
I'm Molly Thomas in Erbil, Iraq. We are 100 kilometers east of Mosul, another 100 kilometers north of Kirkuk, and just a 4-hour drive from Baghdad. All areas ISIS has been fighting for, and we're here to bring you this special report. Known in the West as ISIS, Daesh is the Arabic term to describe the militant group terrorizing millions across Iraq and Syria. No torture is too heinous, no child slave too young, and no execution too gruesome for this group. At minimum, the UN says 12,000 Iraqis were killed last year, another 23,000 injured. ISIS plays off of a historic sectarian divide in Iraq. From Sunnis to Shias, corrupt government officials have brutalized both sides. A controversial US-led war toppled Saddam Hussein, yet left when the country was most vulnerable. Revenge runs deep for ISIS, a group trying to establish an Islamic caliphate by any means necessary. At least 3 million people are now running scared. Fathers, mothers, young boys and girls. They're not refugees, but IDPs, internally displaced, essentially trapped within their own borders. ISIS recently overtook Ramadi, the capital of Iraq's largest province. Its bloody footprint oversteps traditional borders. All areas in red, ISIS controlled. Like a mirage in a dry, dangerous desert, Erbil, Iraq is somewhat of an anomaly. A 6,000-year-old citadel emphasizes the country's rich history. Once Mesopotamia, language, writing, and culture essentially stem from here. Modern Erbil, a part of this cradle of civilization, may surprise you. Calm, organized streets and roads that would rival many in Canada. But if you look beyond the mirage, real problems come into view. The influx of Iraqi IDPs and Syrian refugees is not just a humanitarian crisis, it's really an economic one. The Kurdistan regional government says it's seen a 28% population boom since 2012. So think of all the people that need medical supplies, food, shelter, even jobs. Now this has more than doubled the poverty rate in the KRI. It's also slowed economic growth by 5%. The government says it needs $1.4 billion this year alone to stabilize that economy. Outside the Kurdistan region of Iraq, the Peshmerga, or Kurdish freedom fighters, are holding off ISIS. Canada has 69 members of the special forces on the ground training these troops. But they can't stop the pain that's already passed through these borders. You may not see it on the faces of the children, but in Saddam's eyes, you know something haunts him. Tell me about your son.
تقدر تحكي لنا عن ابنك؟
ابني هو كان عمره 7 سنوات ونص.
My son was 7 years old.
A beautiful boy with a full life ahead of him, simply caught in the crossfire.
والله أنا قلت لك يعني الدكتورة تدري أنا
I live in Mosul and I was employee for the government, so I was target for the ISIS.
وابني فهو لما جاي قالين إذا
They thought that if they killed my big son, that I will go to them. That's why they killed my
هو
son.
يجي يسلم نفسه لنا.
His mother looks lifeless now. It's the pain of trying to protect her 7-year-old when ISIS gunned him down. Shot 3 times in front of his younger brothers and sisters.
فمن شات لي إنه وهذا يعني قال.
Even they didn't let us to bury him.
What would you want to say to people that are a part of ISIS that are terrorizing other families and yourself?
والله شاهب يعني.
I wish that what's happened to us happened to them also.
هو يعني هذا.
Saddam's grief and anger has to take a back seat to the immediate needs of his 5 other children.
So this is the area that there is here, if you feel it, that there is something, and sometimes it gets bigger.
A bump that swells to the size of an egg each night. 27-year-old Sarah Ahmed is a Muslim dentist whose own life has been forever altered by this war.
It's gotten smaller. It's gotten smaller now with medicine and visiting the doctors and giving him medicine, but it's still there.
Like many young professionals, Sarah is based in Baghdad. She expected to work in her own dentistry clinic, that is, until she saw the suffering.
When I first came to this camp, it was empty. A day after I came to this camp where it was empty, there was about 10,000 people in this camp.
10,000 in one day.
In one day.
ISIS's bloody rampage last summer forced 500,000 to flee their home within months. Many Iraqi families have had to move 3 or 4 times. Thousands now find themselves waiting, hoping for some help from the international community.
They are housed either with host communities or they are housed in abandoned schools, abandoned hospitals. For many of them, the food vouchers they are receiving are the only means for them to keep a bare minimum going for them food-wise.
Due to a lack of funding, that food voucher has dropped significantly.
It's rice for the house, it's sugar, and tomatoes.
Once $25 US per person, family members must now survive off $16 each a month. It makes shopping more stressful for fathers like Fawzi. So what do you not buy anymore that you used to buy before?
انت هسه شنو ما تشتري قبل جد؟ والله كل نفس. It's the same, but not a lot like before.
Do you have to ration your children? Do you have to tell them to eat smaller portions?
He's saying I can't tell them that because they are waiting me just to bring them this candies, so I can't just tell them don't eat it.
But Fawzi is one of the lucky ones. Only 32,000 families in the KRI make the food voucher list. That's nowhere close to the almost 1 million displaced in that area.
Last week we have around 1,000 family. They came from Al-Anbar due to the conflict there. But sorry, we don't have anything to do with them till now.
There's not enough funding for those families, so they are living off whatever they have or whatever they brought with them.
Yeah.
That's crazy. It's a sad reality for a problem that shows no signs of slowing down. And this is really the poorest of the poor because the people that could afford have gone off and found places to rent.
But those people here actually either have nothing to begin with or they had something there, you know, back home in Nineveh, which is like a car or a house. And here in the Middle East, this is like a big thing. If you have a car, this is what you own. This is your own life. And they left
gave that all away.
Exactly. Those people here, they would beg you for $1.
The heat makes it worse with sweltering temperatures that will soon reach plus 50 degrees. Amidst the hopelessness, you can't help but notice the children drawn to Dr. Sarah. Look at your little following of kids around here.
Here in Iraq, it's less common to, you know, hug the children or give them love, and they are not used to this. Especially like most of these kids, they have like skin problems, they have like lice, they have scabies, and you know people try to stay away from them because they are scared. But I'm not scared.
Some would call her fearless. As a university student, Sarah stayed in Iraq when her family fled following the U.S. invasion.
They are fighting over my left side. She's like, this is my side, she's telling her. And I'm like, it's all your side, so it's all right.
Her parents beg her to leave the war zone, but she is fully committed to these children and her country. ISIS has threats on your head. Other militia groups have threats on your head. Are you not scared?
Sometimes I get really scared. To tell you the truth, I'm not perfect, but what I mean, when my time comes, it comes. That's it. I have a belief that if I am to die in that day, and those people, I will. But until then, I am committed to like work my full, you know, potential to my fullest to provide for the people, for my people, until that day comes.
What is the Islam that you believe in?
The Islam that I work by every day, that I help all the religious minorities, that I help the Christians here, that displace the Christians and provide for all the Yazidis, provide for all the, helping the girls that fled ISIS and helping to get them back,
What do you think, other young people your age, have been pulled into ISIS, have been pulled into these groups when you see the religion so differently?
I think that ISIS is playing a brilliant game. And I think that they are playing on the fact that there is so many young people that are aimless, They don't have a mission in life. And we all want a mission. So they are providing money, a better life, a cause for them. And what a better cause than a religion.
How do we ensure that these children, the hundreds of kids that are even in this camp, don't end up in that same boat?
I think just education is the most important thing, and just leading by example. And that's why, I started the Go Back to School project. I equipped the school, provided all the things that they needed, and they are now studying. Most of them came to me and it's like, oh, now I'm in the 6th grade, now I'm in the 5th grade, and I did really well.
You're seeing the progress.
Yeah, little by little, because of the environment they're living at, but at least there's a little bit of change, which means a little bit of hope. Yes, exactly. Yes.
But what happens if the situation doesn't change or these children lose hope? Will they be vulnerable to the callings of ISIS? After the break, author Johnny Moore weighs in on defying ISIS.
This is the moment where the best of faith has to stand in defiance of the worst of religion.
Plus, glimmers of hope in Erbil, Iraq. Stay with us.
When ISIS terrorists began to unleash their horror across the Middle East, Johnny Moore was already watching that. But in the fall of 2014, he hopped on a plane to go into the heart of the terror in Iraq. And he brought back an incredible account. He's written about it in his new book called Defying ISIS. Johnny Moore, thank you for being with Context.
Thanks for having me.
I want you to tell us about the first email you got that made you go, wow.
If you received an email that the subject line was awaiting death, it would cause you to stop, right? And that's what happened to me. I'm sitting at my computer and it says awaiting death, and it's from a Christian pastor in the middle of an ISIS town, a town that was being attacked by ISIS at the time. It wasn't yet controlled by ISIS. And the pastor describes in vivid detail. He didn't know if he was going to live or die. And the email, which I begin my book, Defying ISIS, with, it's a real-time report. He says, the mortar just hit the building. What should I do? Should I sit here? Should I try to go to sleep? What should happen? And that email shocked me to my core. Because I thought, as a Christian myself, by my faith alone, I could be in a situation if I just happened to live in that city and not in the United States of America. And it was in that moment, and a number of other moments, that I decided I couldn't be quiet.
Tell us what you encountered when you went into the suffering communities of Iraq.
This is worse than we even realize that it is. And by the way, that's saying something, because we see a lot. ISIS brags about these things. They send them out on Twitter and over the internet. They show us burning people alive and beheading people for their faith alone, and trafficking women and children on slave markets. They show us all those things. But what I discovered when I went on the ground is that it was even worse, the things that they were doing. And then secondly, I discovered that these Christians, they're Christians not for the 21st century, they're Christians from the 1st century. These are people who are willing to die for what most Christians I know are barely willing to live for.
You call this a satanic movement. It's not Islam.
Well, I think it's important to note that ISIS has killed more Muslims than anyone else. And I was actually introduced to the plight of Christians because of Muslim friends of Christians in the region. I was invited to a meeting that was convened by the king of Jordan, because the king of Jordan was concerned about these ancient Christian populations that were facing the threat of total genocidal elimination. And so it is true that every member of ISIS is a Muslim, right? They self-identify as being a Muslim. But it is not true that the ISIS ideology is reflective of Islam as a religion. It's not just a bunch of vagabond terrorists. I mean, they control one contiguous piece of land that's larger than the UK between Iraq and Syria. And not only that, they in effect now control the entire nation of Libya, the whole northeast of Nigeria, most of Somalia, pockets in Egypt, and in other countries in the region. I mean, this is a very, very significant organization.
You're an American. Do you wish American troops would do more?
The only country in the world that can really, really do what needs to be done against ISIS is the United States of America.
Boots on the ground.
It has to
Guns
be boots
in
on
hands.
the ground. But it doesn't have to be American boots on the ground. But America is the only country that can resource the regional armies if they want to become a part of it. When just to make this point, when I was in Iraq, I discovered from meeting with members of government, people on the ground, that the Peshmerga were fighting with Soviet-era weapons against members of ISIS that were fighting with stolen American weapons.
You also write that the West, if the West is involved, it is seen as a holy war. What should we do instead?
We need to provide, as the West, humanitarian assistance. We need to lead out with our love and compassion, not with our boots and our weapons, which is not what we have done in the region. This is the worst humanitarian crisis of our modern era. That's what the United Nations has characterized it as. So we need a massive humanitarian response, and it isn't happening. And then secondly, we need to provide security to these people.
It is now the most dangerous place in the world for women and children.
Well, they have price lists, and the price lists are characterized by religion and by age. And you can see them. A Christian or Yazidi girl from age 1 to 9, you can buy on an ISIS slave market for $170. One 9-year-old Yazidi girl escaped last week, and she'd been raped by 10 men, and she came back pregnant. She's 9 years old. I mean, every sensibility in the world says, we have to stop this.
What do we do?
Well, I wrote the book so that we could educate ourselves. And so we have firsthand information. It's extremely documented. I sent research teams into the region. Secondly, we put unrelenting pressure on members of government and leaders of influence to be engaged in this issue.
Your book was staggering. I just, by page 30, I just had to put it on my knees and pray. But you write that these people are staring down the horror of ISIS with the love of Jesus. Explain what that means. Are sisters and brothers there?
Well, see, this is the thing. I went angry, really, really angry. And I came back with the complexity of emotions I can't even articulate now. But what I saw are Christians that are very aware of the history that they're living in. But you know what's happening is the Christians, displaced all over the country, having lost their livelihood and their homes and everything that they had, are serving not just Christians in Iraq and Syria and in the neighboring places, they're serving Muslims too. Because see, this is the moment where the best of faith has to stand in defiance of the worst of religion. They may know us by our love. This is not a moment, by the way, for Christians to say that all Muslims are jihadists, or for jihadists to say that all Christians are crusaders. This is a time for Christians and Muslims, hand in hand, arm in arm, with a superabundance of love, demonstrating to the world that we can live together with our deepest differences. And all of us are against this hatred that threatens to destroy our entire world.
Is there room for Muslims and Christians to live peacefully in Iraq?
I think because of the history, because of the grudge, because of a lot of things that happened in the past, people just forget to forgive and don't take time to listen to each other's stories. So when our reconciliation project programs, we try to bring all religious people, the head of the religious people together, sit them down and say, you know what, you should believe in all the same thing, all have the same God. We don't say that. We say, you have to respect me as much as I respect you. Just hear what I have to say and I hear what you have to say, and that's how we come over the problems. That's why we cease being enemies and we become friends.
This Chaldean church has filled its compound with hundreds of displaced Iraqis. They call it a center, not a camp. The people relatives, not refugees.
When we received people, we never asked the people which religion you are, or which faith you are belong, or which church you are belong to. So we just opened the doors for everyone.
That freedom is like a breath of fresh air to Majda Habibi. As a Christian in Mosul, she knew she was in the eye line of ISIS. She forced her daughters to wear hijabs to avoid being singled out. Was that tough for you as a mom?
Of course, it's very difficult for me because, we are not wearing this. My mother will never wear this, or my cousins.
Majda has escaped ISIS 3 times. Though she is grateful, she has many questions for God.
Why that's happened for us, why we have to leave our houses, our places, why there is no future for our children.
Christians are not the only minorities in Iraq. The Kurds, Shabaks, Turkmen, and Yazidis are all targets too. Political alienation, arbitrary arrests, targeted abductions, rapes, and killings are all common for these people. Father Douglas is no stranger to the suffering. Born and raised in Baghdad, he was shot in the leg with an AK-47 and kidnapped for 9 days. Have you ever questioned your faith growing up in a tumultuous country?
I often just tell the people, if you want to complain, just leave. If you want to stay, stop complaining. Who I am to complain. Second, as a Christian, I guess we are just not just for a good days, but even for bad days.
Do you think suffering is a part of the faith?
Actually, pain sometimes push people to grow. Without hope, we cannot survive. But with pain, yes. Pain sometimes give us a good lesson to grow up.
But for some, the trauma is still too raw to learn any lessons.
I want my dad to hear my voice. That's if he is alive anymore.
When ISIS arrived, Ronak's father refused to leave his hometown. The family has not heard from him in 3 months. Children like Roaid seem more resilient, but the pain of losing friends still lingers.
We want to live another life, a new life. We want to forget what's happened.
This playground, fully funded by Canadian dollars, has brought back a sense of normalcy to these kids.
Because they lost everything, I remember first time when we offered to them toys, even within 5 minutes, they took the toys and they broke it.
So much pent-up anger.
Yes, and they were also not just anger, they were selfish because they lose everything. They say that if I'm not going to have this toy to me, it's not going to be anyone.
These are the same children that we met today, the ones that are playing so beautifully and sharing and running around. These are the same kids.
That's right.
One-on-one counseling, language, art, and sport classes, and a little tough love has worked wonders. We spent the afternoon with the children. No screaming, no crying, no fighting over toys. Completely different emotions in just a few months.
With the kids, they will forget even who persecuted them, who actually was the reason to fled from them, their towns. But I believe they will not and never forget who stand with them and who helped them.
And love them.
And love them.
The goal is to raise up young Iraqi leaders, ones that will inspire a more peaceful and forgiving country. For Father Douglas in his fight against ISIS, giving these kids a sense of purpose makes them less likely to be lured in.
We are not to be selfish to look to the result now, because the result will come after 20 years. Never transfer our pain, our violence, our hate. Just forgive and let the grace pass generation to generation, and they will survive. My generation, we lose the battle, but let them win the war.
After the break, what lies ahead for this cradle of civilization? Don't go away. Today, we introduced you to only a few Iraqis struggling because of ISIS. Now, they are only a microcosm of the larger looming problem in this country. The UN says by year's end, 10 million Iraqis will need life-saving assistance.
But as much hardship as our team has seen over the last few days, we also see opportunity to love, opportunity to meet needs, opportunity to reconcile with one another. And there is hope. We see it in the eyes of children that are learning to forgive early on. We see it in people like Dr. Sarah, willing to risk her own life for the sake of others. Imagine an Iraq where Muslims, Christians, other minorities live together in harmony. If the next generation figures it out, perhaps this cradle of civilization will return to its former glory.
For the entire Context team on the ground in Erbil, thanks for watching. Poshin Bishlama. Peace be with you from Iraq.